I'm Julie, and I just wanted to share this middle of the night thought process I was having. Just moved, still settling in, and I keep waking up at weird times throughout the night, and so I'm still adjusting to my new sleep area, space, and it's not really the point of this video, so I'll put that aside. So I wake up and I make myself some hot cocoa. Well, it's actually raw cacao with honey that I drink. Not often, but every once in a while, and it felt like it would be cozy and help me settle back into a restful state before the day begins so I can get some more rest. And I know it has caffeine and all that, but still, it just sounded right, and I was most excited about it. So, as I was enjoying my cocoa, I decided to peruse YouTube, and in my feed, I watched a vlogger, and then in the options to watch after the video completed, it gave the option of a video that was a pick a card reading, and it wasn't one that I was subscribed to, but the title said something about like a message you may need to hear right now. And I was like, all right, I'll click on that. That seems like something I could consider, right? And in that moment, I took notice of the fact that whenever I see readings that say urgent message, you need to know this, things like that, I always avoid those readings and readers because when a reader is presenting me with this idea that I need them to tell me something that I need to know, I reject that. And I just thought, okay, this is me being more self-reliant and sovereign, and, makes sense that I'm not expecting vital information that I need to come through somebody else. Because I don't, because, why would it? I am open to hearing my own guidance. I want to know it. I am intuitive. I am discerning. I understand how to take action on what I'm inspired to. So, in my reality and the way I operate, it doesn't make sense to me that any information would need to come through from somebody else that was urgent to me and so important to me. And when this video was worded, slightly differently, and it said, this message might have something you need to know, all of a sudden I was so much more open to it because it was honoring the fact that I am a capable, knowing, sovereign being that can make my own decision about whether the information is pertinent and right for me to take in and consider. Then I started to kind of dig in deeper to my own thought process on that, and I thought, oh, well, let me look at this in comparison to when readers present it as something urgent that I need to know without that word might. And I realized that another reason I've been averted to those type readers and those type titles of readings is because that sense of urgency that they're creating or trying to create feels like an assault on me. And then I realized that earlier on in my life, a sense of urgency was used to manipulate me and to coerce me. And this ranges from everything from just marketing in general to manipulative people who actually, did that. maybe had, lost their patience in my upbringing or whatever it was. But I was put in a position where my best interest wasn't taken into account, and the sense of urgency was used to make sure that I replaced my own best interest with what was preferred by whatever agency was presenting that urgency. So it was used to manipulate me. So of course I've become averted to those things because subconsciously I associated it with manipulation and coercion and an abandonment of my own discernment. So I thought that was interesting. And when I cleared that misunderstanding that I was holding in my subconscious, I was then able to see even more clearly about shown this example. And the reason I was shown the example was so that I would start looking at it in a bigger picture view, right? So the example that popped into my head as a download was how there are certain people in my life who reject me based on the fact that I have information to share with them that will actually shatter the reality that they live in, right? They have a certain way of navigating life with their beliefs, and then here I come along with beliefs that contradict their beliefs. So to allow me in their lives would mean that they shatter their own reality because I serve as an example of how my beliefs are working for me. And I'm talking about where in the places where I'm aligned with truth. Right? I'm not talking about my shadow content that I have not yet cleared up or anything like that. I'm talking about the places where I have come into truth and the authenticity of who and how I really am and want to be. So I thought it was interesting that I was being shown that example, and I brought myself into compassion on it because, I didn't want to go to victim, like, oh, poor me, these people reject me because they think I'm going to ruin their lives. No, it wasn't like that. It was like, oh, they're just trying to keep themselves safe. I can respect that. And I have compassion for that. And I understand that sometimes the uncomfortable lie feels safer than the truth because you get used to it, because you have coping mechanisms that let you live in that reality. So if your coping mechanisms are working for you, then you tend to perpetuate what's comfortable to you as known, and to let that reality that you're living in shatter means that you're now exposed to the unknown, and you don't have coping mechanisms to deal with the unknown necessarily. So it's understandable when people want to shut out the information that I often just embody and am an example of, but also that I would freely share with anyone who asked. And maybe in the past, inappropriately freely shared what I had to offer, because it's only more recently that I've been able to embody a version of myself which can allow for people to live in their suffering and their discomfort without me trying to fix it. So for a long time, when someone was in suffering, I felt justified to try and share something that would help them. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong for the past version of me, because I can see reasons why it worked very well and how it's like seed planting for people, and I can see ways that it didn't work and that it just drove a wedge between me and people. But also, it's part of the process that got me to this realization that I don't have to do that, that I can be supportive through my compassion for people where they're at without trying to change where they're at. And I can still be an example of who I am while doing that in a way that ends up being much more respectful to me and them. So it took me a while to get to that space. So I understand that there are people in my past that did reject me, and they probably had to. And if they hadn't, I probably wouldn't have questioned my methods. And then I was realizing that shutting out of any information in a reading that was titled urgent, important, was kind of like them shutting out any information that I was offering that could potentially shatter their reality. Because it wasn't necessarily true that the urgent messages were life-changing for me and I needed to know them, but the fact that I was willing to shut them out meant that I wasn't even going to consider whether it was important to me. So I was protecting myself, so I was acting out of fear, which disallowed me to actually discern and intuit whether or not it was something meant for me, which it may or may not have been at times, right? But the point is that when I'm pushing something away and I'm resisting it, that is revealing to me a place where I have resistance. In this case, the resistance was rooted in a previous past experience that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to repeat, but could repeat, where urgency was used to manipulate and coerce me. And another clue could have been the fact that I was resisting the urgently labeled readings. That in itself could have been the clue for me to dive deeper into why I was resisting it. But I didn't until I had the contrast of a reading that was presenting as something that might be important to me. Once my free will was restored in the title by using that word might, and I was encouraged to discern, I saw the contrast between that and my rejection of messages labeled as urgent. I think there's something in there for me about marketing in general not being that effective on me. You know, when we encounter trends and when the hype is built up about, getting the newest, latest gadget or thing or whatever, or getting on board or being cool because you have this certain thing. Like an example that just came to mind was the Stanley mug or whatever. There's absolutely no part of me ever that thought she should have or needed or wanted a Stanley mug. In fact, when I encounter trends, up till now, for the most part, I have rejected them simply because this part of me didn't want to be coerced or manipulated into conformity. So, on the one hand, I'm saying that this aversion to being manipulated and conforming and being coerced could have been detrimental in keeping me from information that I might have wanted to consider. Excuse me. I'm also noticing and saying that this aversion to being manipulated and coerced also kept me from mindlessly hopping onto trends and falling prey to marketing ploys that would have me thinking that I needed this or that to be of value, or whatever it may be. that marketing has targeted in our people to you know, make them want to purchase things that they may or may not need. Because again, discernment is the thing that is missing when you're being manipulated or coerced. You're not being allowed to utilize your free will, which to me feels better. But if I'm unconsciously pushing something away because of a shadow aspect, like I don't want to be manipulated, I'm not discerning and I'm not using my free will. I'm just in resistance. So I guess like the whole picture says, and this is just an example that I'm using to illustrate this happening all over on any topic, really. Excuse me, but that my resistance keeps me in a box and keeps me small and keeps me in a comfort zone, that we all have them, and that the bigger picture reveals that when I've had those comfort zones and those boxes and I've been in those spaces, the experience of that has also served me in ways. So it's like it serves you until it doesn't anymore. And so it's the same for people with the reality that they're protecting, who don't want to consider what I have to say or what I'm an example of, is that they're in their box and they're not ready to be out of that box until they're ready. And I think that's where it comes into like what's being shown to me is like this egg, how the egg, um, when the egg is going to crack and be born, like a bird, for instance, has to peck its way out of the shell, and it's broken from within. The egg is broken from within. And it's the same way with humans deciding to break out of their boxes. And that's why if I go in and try to like poke my way into their egg, peck, peck, peck from the outside, it's not welcomed. And it may not even be healthy. That instead I be on the outside, and then when they're ready, they peck their way out of the egg. And then maybe they ask a question or whatever. When they approach me and ask me, when it's come from their inner curiosity or calling or intuition to ask me, that's when the information will be useful and welcomed. And it's interesting that even our culture of like using marketing really does go against that. It's not really set up to allow us to be discerning, but we can be when it's time for us to be. And nothing that they're doing has to change at all, right? Because when there's a product that I will find useful or an important addition to my life, I line up with knowing about it. Or I get the inspiration to search for it. So, and nothing's changed about the way they're marketing necessarily. Another thing is about marketing is repetition is used to ingrain it into us, these ideas. So it can be this subtle way of programming us through repetition. And basically what that repetition is doing is forming a box for us. So if we do get pulled into a box that's formed for, just by virtue of us consuming the content, it doesn't mean that we're in that box forever. We can, like how many times have you bought a product that you thought would solve everything and it just didn't? And then it's like, oh, well, I'm going to get out of this box now. Shattered. that little box is shattered. I tried it out. And so in this way, being in the boxes and experiencing them shatter is also a learning experience and part of us knowing that we can shatter these boxes, and that, you know, it's okay when something doesn't go how we thought it would go. And there's something to be said for approaching things as an experiment, because it allows you to take a toe out of the box, you know, and get more comfortable with being out of the box before you step out fully. There was a thought that I almost grabbed when I was just talking about how sometimes get put in boxes by marketing only to take ourselves out when the reality doesn't live up to the potential. And there was something there for me. Hold on, if I can see if I can get that stream back. Is there anything else on that? I think it's just reiterating for me to say, which hopefully I already said, but I'll say it again in case, that it's just a point to see where we are. It's set up for us that even this way of operating with the marketing and how it's run, the people who do fall susceptible to it are actually also learning that they don't have to be falling susceptible to it, because after much experience or some experience, they will eventually see that what was sold to them and what reasons that they thought that they needed something, what box they put themselves in, is also a box that they'll get out of when the potential didn't live up to, when the reality didn't live up to the potential. So that on a person who doesn't even realize they're in a box, it's like a natural way for that box to serve them, because now they are more discerning about even buying into a gimmick that's being, presented to them repeatedly. And they're also discerning about the expectations they have when they fall into that belief or experiment about what that item or product or gimmick concept that they're adopting and putting themselves in a box with will be. And so life experience is actually lending toward us being humans that operate in a way that we don't have expectations of each other, perhaps, and even of life sometimes, and that we are not attached to the outcome, because sometimes the experience that we're having is not teaching us the thing that we thought. It's not the thing that we prefer, or it's just leading us to another place for a perspective that will help us get to where we prefer, but it's not the final destination. So, meaning, through my experience, I've learned that, I thought something I was going through and believing and experiencing, I thought the box I was in was for one reason, but it actually turned out to be for another reason. And so these experiences, having them, I'm forced to break out of the box that said that I know what's going on with every experience I'm having. No, sometimes I don't understand. Sometimes I'm being shown something bigger than I can even conceptualize at the moment. I just have to go through the experience, and then in retrospect, the picture becomes more clear. So it's all divinely orchestrated. So even though you may come across a spiritual teacher, or even me, that may have said something like, in order to relate in a fair manner, we don't want to have expectations of each other, and we don't want to be attached to the outcome. That might not stick as easily as the experiential learning that you go through when you actually have the experience of expecting of somebody and them not living up to the expectation, feeling disappointed, or feeling bitter or resentment when they don't do what you wanted them to do or expected them to do. Even though a lot of times in our relating dynamics, it's unsaid. What you expect of somebody is not even talked about or agreed upon. And that's a higher way to handle it, I think, is having a conversation, talking about the things that you normally don't talk about, and making sure all parties agree about what they're wanting to experience with each other. And if they don't agree, then there's a compatibility issue. And then, if this is the most exciting thing to you to be in those agreements with people, then you know that the outcome, whatever it may be, is for your highest good. And you may not know what that is at the time that you're entering into the experience. Because so many times, I thought I was entering into a happily ever after, relationship with a man. In fact, I could even say every time, because I didn't want to date around. I didn't want to experience many men. I just wanted to be with one man. Of course, there are deeper reasons for that, And so every time I went into an experience thinking this is the one, I would get shown like that. Even though you had this experience, it's not the one. But look at all the benefit you got from having gone through the process of experiencing this. Look how much you learned about yourself and life and people and what you don't want, and therefore knowing what you do want. And so I couldn't deny that the experiences I was having were very useful and lending towards a bigger picture, lending towards me knowing myself better, and all kinds of beneficial things, which would actually allow me to match up with somebody who I will be compatible with and to enter into a relationship that is very healthy. But first, I had to have a lot of experiences that weren't what I thought, and I also had to kind of be humbled into understanding that it's not fair of me to expect of people, especially if I haven't even had a conversation with them about what it is that I expect. And it's also not wise of me to predict the outcome of why I'm in that experience with them. If it's, my highest excitement, then I know whatever the experience is for my highest and greatest good. And so I am going to go into that experience with this allowing for I don't know, so that I can learn, so I can understand more or see more or, get to know myself better within that context. And that's a difficult thing because the nature of that is that there's no box. The only box is the agreements, perhaps, but those are mutually agreed upon, right? So we're going to learn in this container where we both agree to this. But the outcome is not part of it, so it also puts us in a position to be experiencing that unknown, which is something that we have to become comfortable with, and that we know we can survive because we've had plenty of experiences leading up to it where we experienced something that we didn't expect, or it didn't go how we thought or wanted. And then we had to live through that, and it may have been very uncomfortable, and some of us maybe not even conscious of the fact that even though it was uncomfortable and we didn't like it, we actually did live through it, and it was okay. And that we are stronger or wiser or, know ourselves better for having been through that. These are just my middle of the night thoughts after having some cocoa and waking up in this new space that I'm living in, and just getting used to it here. It's a really good space. I like it. But I used to, at my old place, I had this little cubby that I bought a special bed that would fit into it, in the wall. It was like two walls that kind of jutted out, and so it was like a cubby, and I would put my bed in there. And it was just long enough that I could lay, from head to toe. And maybe like a couple inches, leeway. So it was that cozy. And it also, I have memory foam mattresses, 2 of them actually, because I had bought one and it just wasn't high enough. And so I bought another one and I put it on top of it. And this cubby used to hold my bed in nice and firm. But now that I'm out of the cubby, the mattresses are kind of just like, they don't have enough structure. You know, the memory foam, it's like you'll just sink into it because it's memory foam. And so I'm like having a heck of a time sleeping in my new space, which, you know, it's okay because, like I just talked about, there are reasons, right? There are reasons that I'm going to be up at this hour. Just with my own self and space and having time to maybe do some, you know, watching of YouTube or whatever. And also the need to kind of be quiet and be in the space where it's so quiet. That's been different here. It feels so much more quiet here than it was at my other place. Although the other night, the wind was blowing so much. That was an interesting night. But anyway, I need to purchase a new bed, and the one that I've chosen, the perfect one, is currently out of stock. And I've searched and searched for an alternative, but there really isn't one that has all the features that's also in my price range. So I am, you know, just awaiting that to become in stock so that I can get it here. And, you know, if it doesn't, then I'll figure something else out, some alternative. But that is, I think, something that will help me have a better night's rest. And also, I was thinking about adding a canopy to my bed because that will help me simulate the cubbiness. And I think it's interesting because if you look at human design, there's in the more intricate details of human design, you can find out what your environment is. And what this is meant to be is what environment you feel most comfortable in, that is most vital to your feeling good and well in life. Well, I would say. And mine is caves. And what that means is that I do really well. I feel most comfortable. I thrive in cave-like spaces. So it makes perfect sense to me why I slept so well in my little cubby, you know? And that why I also end up setting up my living space as a studio. Even though I have, you know, another bedroom, I end up using it for storage, you know, neatly putting things on shelves and having things nice and organized. And I like that. I don't have to have extra things in my space. They can be stored separately. And then my space is just more simple, and it's also just a smaller space that I'm doing my living in. So anyway, that's just some side notes and personal stuff about me, but maybe I'm sharing because it might inspire you to look at your own human design and find out more about, you know, how your energy's working and what environment you can thrive in as well. Either of these topics, if you have any comments or perspectives to share, I'd be interested, and I encourage you to. And also, I'm going to end this video until